Hello. It is Thursday, July 9th. I've got my afternoon coffee. I had it a little late today. I was running a little slow. How are things with you, Paul?
Yeah, good. I'm trying to find the LinkedIn event so I can post it saying we're live now. I was about to say we're going live, but now we're here. We're
You're
live.
live. It's
We're
happened. Don't worry
we're
about it.
live. Oh my god, this week has been so freaking busy and it went so quick. Oh my gosh.
You were up in Brisbane last night, is that right? At
I
the
was.
OWASP
Yep.
chapter meeting. What was your talk on?
Yeah, it was on like hunting threats, adversary threats in GitHub. And the great thing is that we actually had some people from GitHub there and Microsoft there. So
Love it.
I did not modulate my comments based on their presence. But yeah, it went really well, and it's basically a teaser. So I tried like the first half of the talk, Jen, was like just introducing people to this idea of the two software threats, like the vulnerable threats, which OWASP is the OWASP top 10 is there to address, and then this other risk that we're not really talking about that AppSec tools don't help you with, which is the intentionally malicious threat, right? Introducing that, and then I segued eventually into like finding hunting in real time in front of people, actual DPRK threats in GitHub, and I have a lot of those because we found 2,500 PolinRider, which we'll talk about later. But like, oh my gosh, there's just so much material, so much canvas.
Yeah. Well, a little teaser. This is the same topic we're doing a workshop on at DEF CON. So if you're going to be at DEF CON, definitely come check it out. I don't think the schedule has been released yet for the Adversary Village or the AppSec Village, but we'll be in those.
Yeah. One really observation about that really quickly. Somebody drove down from the Sunshine Coast all the way down to Brisbane, which is like only like an hour and a half or something, but they couldn't get into the building because it was at the Octopus Deploy headquarters. So I really feel bad, John. I'm sorry that happened to you, mate. We're going to address it for next month's.
Yeah, those are always tricky when you have the host have strict security.
Yep,
I've definitely run into that before.
I'm going to post about it on LinkedIn just as a heads up. Post somebody at the front door, right?
All right. So I think we have a couple of quick hits. And then as we've been talking about for a couple of weeks now, we're going to have an extended interview with the head of security, Mikael Barbero from OpenVSX. But first, our quick hits. So Paul, we published 2 pieces of research this week, right? The first is about the PolinRider campaign. This is a Lazarus Group North Korean campaign that you discovered earlier this year. That's kind of a little bit of a spinoff of Contagious Interview that's more focused on taking over GitHub repositories. But what I think is super interesting about the research that you published this week is about how it is jumping to package ecosystems without any additional effort on the part of the threat actors. So maybe just talk like a paragraph, right? Real quick. What is it? I know I'm telling you to be brief.
This is the difficult one. Okay. PolinRider is basically North Korea has automated when they compromise developer victims, they basically automatically push malicious packages into all the repos that person has access to them locally. Initially, that was just a GitHub thing. That's what we found earlier this year. But now in the Go and PHP ecosystems, those registries, Packagist and the Go registry, they ship packages that are GitHub repos. So now the jumping the fence is these repos automatically become packages inside this ecosystem, which is crazy. You don't have the same additional authentication that you do in NPM and PyPy and some of the other ecosystems.
Nice. I am dropping the link to that in the chat. And then why don't you talk a little bit about the second piece of research on a cybersecurity startup that you discovered publishing infostealers to NPM. And like, I'm just going to editorialize for a moment. I get really irritated when vendors do call it shady, call it borderline, whatever you want to call it. Things.
Well, it's illegal in some places, right?
Sorry?
It's illegal in some places, right?
Or illegal things, yeah, to manipulate the market. And we don't necessarily know why this vendor chose to do this. But talk a little bit about what you found.
It's funny how many of these come from the same ecosystem. But anyhow, the reality is that this is a common practice we see with certain cybersecurity startups. Basically, what happens is, to make a name for themselves, they do a bunch of, they publish malicious VS Code extensions or malicious NPM packages or whatever the case may be. And then they use their publishing of that data to kind of prove the point that you need the solution that they're hawking, right?
Like, to get a little dramatic, this is like setting fires and then being like, oh, you need my like new sprinkler system.
Yeah. These particular info stealers these particular 7 info stealers are really unusual in the sense that the author went to great lengths to not actually steal. For example, it ganks everything in your .ssh .ssh folder on a Linux box or a Mac box, everything in your .aws folder except the credentials file, or except the actual PEM SSH keys. So they're going out of their way to not actually gank but then they take everything else. Now the problem is that you can actually put credentials and config files in AWS directories, for example. So it's not a perfect delineation, but the fact that the author went through so much trouble to do that, but then just stole all this stuff, right? Like the amount of data that these info stealers steal is, the point of it is to
get 7 different
data
points. It's an absurd amount of data.
And when you tie all those things together,
11, not 7.
Yeah, it's a really strong identity graph of who that person is, what they do, what the name of their machine is, all this stuff, which you can then use later on as part of your data set for whatever thing you're trying to hawk. So we called it out.
Very likely this, like you said, violates some laws. I wouldn't be surprised if this had some kind of a GDPR impact, but you reported the publisher and the packages. They have all since been taken down. So the person who did this has lost their NPM account, which, you know what, good. I don't like to see this kind of behavior.
Yeah, and I was going to say a second ago, there's something important there that no, God, I'm getting old now, Jen. Something there about the NPM packages. I'll remember later on and jump in.
So this kind of segues into one last thing before we hit on OpenVSX, and that is a lawsuit that we found out about recently. It was filed, I think, last week. A startup called MeetingTV has taken Palo Alto Networks to court over something Koi Security did. Koi is a company that Palo Alto Networks acquired earlier in the year. This is some actions that happened at Koi before the acquisition happened. But essentially, Koi published a blog about a campaign and listed this company, MeetingTV's domain, as at the very top of their C2 infrastructure, like IOC's list. And as a result, this company said that they got blocked by a whole bunch of, people who use their product. They lost revenue, lots of issues with this. But the important takeaways here are, first of all, it was not a malicious domain. It was a safe domain. So Koi Security made a mistake in publishing this domain as an IOC. And what this lawsuit is alleging, and I'm going to be very interested to see how the court case goes, because it's alleging basically irresponsible use of AI. That they're alleging that Koi used AI in their analysis and that it hallucinated the involvement of MeetingTV's domain and that they didn't validate it. So Koi has since removed that domain from the IOC list in the blog. They updated it back in February or so. But reading between the lines here, probably, MeetingTV initially wanted some kind of a payout for it, didn't get it, and has taken them to court.
Yeah, and I suspect right now, if you were to search GitHub for that domain, you would find it in lots and lots of people's block lists still, because this is the problem, right? Once it gets out there, people suck it in. Yeah, Koi can remove it, but then everybody else that's pulled it from Koi, they're not removing it, and that's what's actually blocking you. So this is a supply chain in reverse. When you block something, the supply chain of hosts that you're allowed to go to that's a difficult thing to unwind, man. And it comes back to my metaphor. It's a lot easier to stop somebody pouring the poison into the water supply than it is to try to take the poison out of the water supply.
Yeah, and to your exact point, in one of the articles that I read about this, they said both Verizon and Palo Alto Networks themselves are still blocking this domain. So
yeah, there you go.
It's very hard to unwind it once it happens. That's why we really make a serious effort not to publish false positives. Okay.
Real quick. We want to talk about this in a later. We want to talk about this at a later date. But this is evidence of something we're seeing everywhere, which is that people are shipping directly out of AI into their blog posts and into their finding list and into all kinds of stuff, right? And the problem is that gets out there and that gets disseminated, and then people suck that in, and then you're poisoning these things. So we as an industry have to get better. Everybody thinks that they're an expert now because they got Claude and they got Codex spitting this stuff out. But you have a responsibility when you generate the stuff with AI to make sure that what it's saying is legit and true. And if it's not, then you are personally, well, I'm going to say you might be personally liable.
Yeah. And I guess the last part of the rant that I'll add to this is we talk a lot in this industry about the harm false positives cause to a security team's reputation with developers. And that is all legitimate. Yeah. That is a problem. But this is, kind of the upstream impact of it, of when you publish a false positive, you can ruin someone's life. So this is a responsibility we should take really seriously. Okay, end rant. We're going to do something we have not done before. And that is, we have our first guest. I pre-recorded this interview because our guest is based in France, and the way that the world is shaped doesn't make that time zone very friendly for when we record this podcast. But here's the story of how we ended up getting our first guest. We did an episode maybe a month ago or even longer where we talked about a malicious VS Code extension for the NX console extension that was published in both VS Code and OpenVSX. This is the extension that was consumed by somebody at GitHub and then enabled Team PCP to gain access to several thousand of their repositories. We actually had someone from Eclipse Foundation reach out after that episode aired and said that they would love to have their head of security come and talk with us about what they're doing at OpenVSX so that the community kind of understands how that ecosystem is different and what the security measures are. And we jumped at this opportunity because it's not often that we get the registries, out talking to us about their security practices. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and play the interview. Paul and I will be here hiding behind the scenes. We'll still be in the chats. And then we'll pop back in and kind of talk about the conversation afterwards. All good, Paul?
Yeah, let's do this. I'm going to go on mute.
Bear with me, everyone, because I have to hide us and then I have to bring the video in, and it's like 5 clicks.
For taking some time today to talk to the community about what's going on at OpenVSX. But before we get into that, tell everyone who you are. What do you do?
Thank you first for having me. I'm really glad to chat with you. So I'm Mikael Barbero. I'm head of security at the Eclipse Foundation. I lead the team at the foundation that initially the mission was to help our project to improve their security posture. And we moved to also help the OpenVSX team to secure the registry. And now we are even involved on the AI-assisted vulnerability discovery with our recent partnership or participation to the Project Glasswing from Anthropic.
I saw in your LinkedIn background, you've been with Eclipse for several years. Seems like you came from more of a software engineering DevOps background.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I've been with the Eclipse Foundation for 11 years now. So quite a while, and I changed the role a couple of times. So I started with software engineering as my background. So strong focus on supply chain security. And when we started this team to actually focus on supply chain security, that's how I grew up and I managed to get this role. So that's also one of the reasons why I'm still at the foundation, is those opportunity to grow. That's a great place to work.
Yeah, and I always like seeing people who used to work on the code and the pipelines now responsible for securing them, because I think you have a little bit more of an internal understanding of how it works. Why don't we start with telling the audience, what is the Eclipse Foundation?
Yes. So the Eclipse Foundation is an open source software foundation. So we are a non-profit organization. We hosting open source projects. So we are headquartered in Europe, in Brussels. We used to be incorporated in the US, but 5 years ago, we moved entirely to Europe. So we are the home of more than 420 projects. So many of your listeners probably know the well-known Eclipse Java IDE from 25 years ago. But now it's only a minority of our projects. It's 20 to 25 of our projects, and the 300 or 400 others that are in a widely diverse ecosystem. So we have projects around software-defined vehicle. We have IoT projects, Eclipse Mosquito, Eclipse Paro. For MQTT runtimes, we have also, of course, still Java developer tooling, with Eclipse Che, Eclipse C, and others. We have many projects in many diverse ecosystems.
Yeah, and certainly not the least of which is OpenVSX. At this point, where does it fall in terms of popularity amongst the Eclipse Foundation projects? Is it on the higher end?
Yeah, definitely. So OpenVSX started a bit weirdly or a bit as a niche, for sure. So OpenVSX started in 2019 from one of our member company to provide an extension marketplace to their cloud IDE called Eclipse here, because this supports extensions with an API compatible with VS Code. And given that the Microsoft Visual Studio Marketplace does not allow any other IDE to consume extensions from this marketplace, they have to create something. So that's how OpenVSX was born now 7 years ago. And we started to run it as a bit later in 2020 or late 2020. And
yeah,
for sure,
and it's changed a lot in the last 1 to 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. So the rise of all those VS Code forks. So if you think about Cursor, IBM Project Bob, Google Anti-Gravity, they are all either fork of Microsoft VS Code or VS Code compatible IDEs. So they can consume extensions, the same extensions as Microsoft Visual Studio Code. And so they all from OpenVSX because, of course, they need a place to consume their extensions. So we switched from a niche project, a niche service for one of our own projects to basically becoming critical infrastructure for the AI-assisted development IDEs of the world.
Yeah, that's a big change. I want to definitely talk about how your team has been working on OpenVSX security, but just broadly, what has it meant for OpenVSX to become the extension marketplace of choice for AI developers?
So becoming critical infrastructure raised a lot of challenges. The first one being, of course, the infrastructure needs, the number of requests, the bandwidth requirements. So we moved from a couple of thousands of requests per second at peak time to exceeding 2,000 or 3,000 million. Now we also have 300 millions. Last April, we were at 300 millions downloads per month. We switched to 600 million in May, and we're expecting to pass the billion downloads per month by the end of the year for sure. So we are really on
That's
the
a lot of
exponential curve.
infrastructure.
Exactly. So similarly, the number of extensions that we received, the number of publishers that publish those extensions to the registry just increases exponentially. So managing this exponential growth has been a challenge. We had some hiccups as an infrastructure would expect to have when with similar growth. But yeah, that has been one of our main focuses, stability. But of course, this growth, we noticed it, but of course, threat actors also noticed it because we became a good place to be and a good place to distribute malware. So that's where we had also to up our game, because initially when we had only a couple of hundreds of extensions from well-known and good acting people, that was not an issue. But now malicious actors are publishing malware.
Yeah, so before we get into that, I didn't warn you I would ask this question, but it occurred to me while you're talking. Do you know off the top of your head what the average number of extensions getting published are on OpenVSX now?
We have about 1,200. Yeah, 1,200 extensions.
Okay.
We may be at 1,500 now. I know the latest. Sorry, 12,000 to 15,000, 15,000 extensions right now. That's I don't have the latest number at hand, and we have more than 8,000 publishers as well.
Yeah. So the Eclipse Foundation is similar to other foundations like OpenSSF and the Linux Foundation, and that the community is driving this growth. You shared with me before that part of the reason that you were able to expand the security function is through investments from the community. Can you talk a little bit about why Eclipse got money?
Yeah, sure. But before that, maybe I just would like to re-explain. When we talk about OpenVSX, we talk about three things, and the funding comes from this trinity. So we have the open source projects. So we run the open source projects just like any other open source project like the foundation. That's where the code contributions are made and where anybody can actually take the code and run their own instance. There is OpenVSX, the service that we run and that we scale to the numbers that I just listed earlier. And then we have the working group that has been funded more recently, 2023, to actually drive and steer the services. So the initial goal was to have this working group to fund the development and the support of the service. But the scale of the growth has been outsizing our hope. That really was really beyond any of our imagination initially. So we had to find other mechanisms to fund the development and the security of the projects. So we still have the working group, and many of the vendors that support OpenVSX are members of the working group. We also had support from Alpha Omega, the OpenSSF project managed by Google, AWS, and Microsoft to help us improve the security posture of the code base. And finally, we had this new initiative to create what we call OpenVSX Managed Registry. So it's for all the Google Anti-Gravity, AWS Kiro, Project Bob, and cursors of the world to provide them with SLA and the malware detection, early malware detection, and various services. Just any company building a critical service will to have when they rely on critical infrastructure. And those combination of funding and the treaty of what is OpenVSX really help us sustain all those entities separately and with involvement from the community.
That's great. Now that you have some funding and support, what's your team been working on to improve the marketplace?
Yeah, so of course, the first thing was to be stable, keep the light on. Initially, that was our main focus, and very quickly we focused on security. And our priority there was definitely to have pre-published security scanning. So that's something that has been missing from OpenVSX in day one, but with the numbers of publishers and threat actors noticing OpenVSX, we had to add that. So that has been the priority end of 2025, deployed early 2026. Initially, we ran only as a monitoring mode. So we were not flagging anything, or we were flagging it only for internal use so that we can tweak the knobs until we reach the proper level of findings. And finally, we turn it on. So basically now, for every publication, there is before it's actually, an extension is actually available for download, there is a scan being run. And if there is something suspicious, then it is quarantined. And then there is a human review, a human in the loop there to review the extension.
Yeah, that sounds very similar to how a lot of people implement tools within their own companies, right? Don't turn it on until you're confident it's not going to spit out a bunch of false positives and break pipelines.
Yeah, exactly. False positive is really something that scares. We don't want to repose publishers. We want to still accept the good publishers. So tweaking the knobs to reduce the false positive rate is really hard and a big focus of continuous improvement, of course.
Yeah,
But
I
that
think.
was-
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That was our initial focus, but we've also did a couple of other improvements. So for instance, we had a lot of issues with tokens. So initially we didn't have any token expiration. Again, it was really a niche project. So the security posture was aligned with the expectation from such a project, but now we had to up our game. So we overhauled the whole security posture of the tokens where there are no limited lifetime expiration. We also have scanning. So many of our publishers initially were including their tokens, their publishing token in their extensions. That, yeah, it happens.
Hard-coded into their, yeah.
Yeah, so they were shipping us their tokens. So of course, anybody who were downloading their extension had access to their tokens. So we had to revamp all of this and do token revocation, token identification at publishing time so that we protect our publishers and we protect our consumers from supply chain attack.
Yeah, I want to hear more about how the malware scanning detection works, but this kind of prompts a question. A lot of the ecosystem is dealing with what you're dealing with right now. I'm sure you follow the changes that are getting implemented in places like NPM, with being able to mass revoke, other features that are, to your point, maybe a little overdue. What are the things that you kind of see as like the major changes that need to be happening so that these systems are a bit more trustworthy?
So we don't do that alone. we rely on the community as well to help us. Again, it's an open source project and anyone can look at the code and see what we are doing. Of course, some of the malware scanning, the rules are not necessarily all available. We don't want to need the recipe for any malware creator to find whether they will pass or fail the detection. But for the detection part, what we created is the security researcher recognition program, so that we recognize and we created badges to recognize security researchers who will help us improve the detection and also report to us malware that they detect and we didn't detect it yet. And so we work with them to improve our detection on a continuous basis. So that's something that is super helpful. And the roadmap for improving the detection is really tied to those contributors. And we have a page on where we list all the contributors. I guess we can add some links to this podcast.
Yeah, I saw that while I was doing some research. I'll add it to the show notes.
Excellent, thank you. But the plan for this is really tied to contribution from the community, but we also have other plans. So for instance, we've already started to harden the namespace and publisher verification. So of course, there are still a lot of attacks on typo squatting or namespace squatting, and people who try to copycat popular extensions, not necessarily by typo squatting, but still the release are very similar, use the same icon and so on. So all of those detections, they are in the pipe and we are deploying them on a regular basis.
Yeah, so let's start really basic. I want to publish an extension on OpenVSX. What kind of vetting do I have to go through as a publisher so that you can make sure when I publish something, I'm maybe a more credible source? And there's been complaints about other ecosystems that allow for publisher accounts to be very new, to not have a lot of identity validation. What are you looking for when you onboard new publishers?
Yeah. So the very first thing that you have to do is to sign a publisher agreement with us. So we don't necessarily verify the identity of the signature of the people who signed this agreement, but that's something that set the ground rules, what you can do at OpenVSX and what action can we take if you violate those rules. So that's the first thing. And it's not necessarily something that you have everywhere to have this publisher agreement up front. So we are really focusing on that. We think it's really important to have that first. Then if you publish from GitHub, for instance, you are allowed by default to publish on your Git in a namespace that match your GitHub user ID. So that's the basis. Now, if you want to publish to another namespace, you have still non-automated. You have to interact with people from the team to demonstrate that you actually own the namespace. So if it's a domain, then we do a domain verification, or domain ownership verification, and so on. And some of the plan, of course, in security on the security side is to automate this whole pipeline, so that we can provide some trustworthy signal to our consumers when they download an artifact that is badged as verified, that everything is in check.
Okay, so I get my OpenVSX account approved. I go to upload my first extension. What's the scanning look like for that?
So it will be transparent for you because you will use either the command line tool that we provide to publish to the extensions or to the registry, or the Microsoft tool. They are both compatible. And the scan happen in the background. So if everything is green, it just get available on the website and you're done. If it is quarantine, then you have to wait for final approval, final review. So I think we have some SLOs on there. It's usually within the day. It can take up to 2 days to scan and verify, but that's basically how it happens.
Yeah, so you're looking, it sounds like, for things like hard-coded secrets that could create a security issue, but you're also looking for malware. I know you can't share the malware detection rules, but in general, like, what kind of behavior are you looking for when you run that scan?
So we search for payload, non-payload. For malware, of course, we use Yara in the background for many of those scans. We also use AI-assisted malware detection, of course, for some behavioral changes. We search for secrets and credentials, so not only our own, but also others. We look for signals of impersonation. So as I mentioned, for typo squatting, brand jacking. We also recently added obfuscation tricks like Glassworm. By the way, I'm really amazed and by the ingenuity of the Glassworm author.
I know they're terrible, but they're so good at what they're doing.
Exactly. You have to give them that. But those obfuscation tricks, we add them on a continuous basis when we discover new techniques. That's part of it. And our plan is to move toward the update path anomalies. So we have detected some sleepers, so extensions that are published for a while and that are actually good, doing nothing malicious, and stay there for a while. And the next update is actually the one that will bear the malicious payload. Those patterns and those behaviors, that's the thing that we are also detecting. So it's not only about the scan at publishing time, it's also the scan of the global behavior or the global life cycle of the extension. We've seen also, and we look at some signals like bot inflated download counts. A new extension that magically get 1 million downloads in a couple of days, that's very suspicious. So this kind of stuff that we're adding gradually to our scans and our detection systems.
Yeah, you mentioned sleeper extensions. We certainly see that in every ecosystem where a threat actor will publish something that's benign, and then they'll publish a malicious version later, and then often they'll publish another benign version after that so they can hide it. So you're looking for these sleepers in your extension marketplace. What kind of signals do you look for that tells you that something may become malicious but isn't malicious yet?
Hard to tell without disclosing all the secret recipe, but it's a combination of the size, the download number. It's very often
Behavioral.
Behavioral. And of course, the new scan. So something that has been benign initially and marked as okay, if all of a sudden the update triggers some even low signals, that's a sign.
Okay. So I'm curious what your team has been seeing in terms of trends with what people are doing with malicious extensions. You've been scanning for a few months now, and I'm sure you have some ideas of what you see more often than not. What's it look like in that world?
Yeah, Glassworm is really the flagship example. They are all more or less copycat of that nowadays. So clone and sleep type of campaign. Again, we had the V2 detected by Socket back in April. It's really bad, but we are getting there at detecting those and are getting better at detecting of those. But that's the trend. But otherwise, it's really just the usual stuff. Credential leaks. So one compromised publisher, and then the snowball
It
effect.
just spiraled from there.
Exactly. So it's a common responsibility or global responsibility of all registries to help users and publisher to not disclose those and to be able to revoke the credentials as fast as possible. So yeah, that's the two main things: that the very advanced, tricky malware like Glassworm, and the good old-fashioned leak credentials that end up.
Are you seeing, like, between the two categories, account takeovers where somebody's credentials were stolen and now malware is being published on their account, versus something that was always bad, even if it was a sleeper? Are you seeing one versus the other being more common?
Not necessarily the Glassworm kind, making more headlines. So we hear more about them. The blast radius is also usually larger because they go and they take it for a bit longer. But no, we don't necessarily see anyone taking the other.
Nothing is ticking up. Something you might be familiar with is North Korea's state-sponsored threat actor group has really been favoring delivering malware through the task.json file through VS Code extensions. Are you seeing anything similar happening in the OpenVSX and ecosystem?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
In VS Code, that's a feature that can be managed. What would you say is the best practice for people who are consuming these extensions? Because essentially, I'll take a step back and explain to anybody in the audience who doesn't know. Task.json files get used very similarly to an npm lifecycle script where it auto installs. And the benefit if you're a threat actor is if you download it, it'll auto install the malware without the user having to do anything. And Mikael, what would you tell an OpenVSX user that they should either be looking out for or change with their settings so that they're not susceptible to that kind of attack?
That's where actually to understand that basically none of the user of OpenVSX know that they use OpenVSX. They use Cursor, they use anti-gravity, they use Kiro, and they install extension from each of those clients. So that's where the collaboration and the fact that those companies are actually contributing to OpenVSX and working with us, that makes the big changes, because they have to implement client side at the download phase or when they auto update, because they control the auto update. We don't provide any client for auto update. We just deliver the extensions. So that's where each of those, sometimes they are just forks and clones of the VS Code base. But for many, they have their own custom tweaks, and we aim at providing them as much information as possible so that they can act and prevent this kind of behavior from happening in their developer tools.
Yeah, so you're fighting like an extra layer of abstraction when you're trying to help people understand the risk here, because they're not consuming directly from you the way that perhaps someone might consume directly from NPM.
Yeah, exactly. So when let's take Kiro. If someone installed the new Java extensions in Kiro, we had no way to tell them that the last version of the previous version of these same extensions was malicious.
I was going to ask you what keeps you up at night, but that's going to keep me up at night, I think.
Yeah, exactly. That's definitely keeping me up at night, and all the update path, the auto update path that all those IDs provide. And one extension can turn malicious tomorrow, and all those good ones and the very famous one are at risk.
Yeah, so that definitely makes it all the more important that OpenVSX is doing proactive scanning. There's a lot of debate in the community right now about the role of a registry. Should they be holding things back before allowing something to publish? And I think the community more and more believes, yes, the registry has a responsibility to look for dangerous things. And in your case, you don't have an easy way to notify people. If I am consuming an OpenVSX extension through Cursor, is there something that I should be subscribing to so that I know from OpenVSX if there's been some kind of security incident?
Oh, yes. So we publish advisories and report whenever, and postmortem whenever there is an incident. We also publish all the extensions that are detected and flagged as malicious, so that those platforms can actually consume those lists to warn their users. We don't have a feed for end users or for users who don't know they use OpenVSX, because that would be pointless given that they don't know us usually. But we provide as many things as possible to the IDs so that they can consume this information and warn their user.
I will put a plug in for open source malware. Anybody who wants a feed of the extensions that we know are malicious, you can come get our free feed. Okay, we'll start to wrap up here. You've said this a couple times already, and I think I have a good idea of your answer, but this is your opportunity to say what you want from the community, the people who listen to this podcast. Many are security practitioners, many are engineers themselves. What are you looking for, whether it's filling open roles, contributions, your security research program? Give us some homework.
Yeah, definitely. I will. And that's actually what helps me sleep well at night, is that we are not doing that alone anymore. So we were running the service while it was a niche, but still we were running it by ourselves with a very small community. But now we have member companies and the community and security researchers that have interest in OpenVSX. And we have homework for each of those communities. So if you are a security researcher, you can join the security research program, recognition program. So if you report malware detection or even security vulnerabilities on the code base, then you are eligible to be part of this. We also have nice perks for the highest grade of those researchers. We don't do bug bounty, just to be clear. We just offer some nice perk to recognize their work. If you are a developer, software engineer, then you can also look at the code base, contribute features, contribute new security mechanism. The code is open source and you have nothing to do. Just go to the code base at GitHub and contribute there. And if you're a company that actually build on top of OpenVSX, so you have an AI assisted tool that is compatible with VS Code Marketplace, and you most certainly consume from OpenVSX. So become a member of the working group. So that helps steer the service. And you can also, if you want some list level agreement for OpenVSX, we can provide that with the managed registry, the managed OpenVSX registry. So that's how we do that, not all by ourselves, with the help of the community. So that's really what we're building and what we're aiming for.
That's great. We'll get those links out there. And I'll say, I talk to a lot of people in the community who are like looking to change jobs, improve their resumes, looking for things that will set them apart. And I would say making contributions to a project like this is often more meaningful to a potential employer than going out and getting another certification. So yeah, seems like a great place to get involved and build your resume and maybe feel good about what.
Exactly. Yeah, there is a seat at the table for everyone. So please
Great.
get engaged.
Mikael, thank you so much for joining us. We'll stay in touch, and anyone in the community who's interested, drop some comments and we can make connections. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. It was a great discussion. Thank you so much.
And we're back. Do I have
It
your
did
audio,
not-
Paul?
It did not auto unmute me. Which
It didn't
I think
auto
is
unmute you. I wasn't sure if it would or not. All right.
It
That was
works.
a great interview.
Good job.
Yeah. So
I'm super impressed. That worked.
what are your thoughts on my conversation with Mikael?
Oh man, a lot of thoughts. I mean, first, good on them for being really proactive with security. Like I was checking out the security contributors page, and I'm like, I want to be on this. I also think sometimes, to one of the last things he said, like you be part of the working group, is like a security researcher can't go and join all of these security working groups. So we have to, in their choice not to use a bug bounty program, to do it in their own kind of way. I always question that a little bit. Like, is this making it too hard? You got to go too into your world. But all that being said, I'm keen. Like I'm looking at it right now. I've got the source code repository open. I want to be part of, I want to understand how we, as open source malware can help, but also like how I personally can help that ecosystem. Because he's right. I mean, it's growing tremendously. I've been watching the new packages come in, and I think there's a lot of places there we can help.
Yeah, the numbers that he cited are pretty wild in terms of how rapidly it's growing. A couple of things that I continue to think are really just interesting from that conversation is the volume of people who don't know that they're using OpenVSX as they're consuming extensions from OpenVSX. And I think that presents a really nuanced problem, right?
It does. Yeah, that's a great point. Like I thought before I really understood the OpenVSX ecosystem, I thought it was much more niche than the Microsoft VS Code. And it turns out it's kind of the opposite, that more things use OpenVSX than do the official Microsoft VS Code marketplace. So that's an interesting eye-opening experience for myself.
Yeah, the other thing, and it's, I guess, no surprise that Glassworm is on his mind. One of the links that I shared in the comments is a report that came out earlier this year about a whole bunch of malicious extensions pushed through the Glassworm campaign onto OpenVSX. But him equally seeing that type of behavior versus typo squats, it's always fascinating to see what the trends are and how they're different in each ecosystem. And his efforts that they're working on to tie a publisher to some kind of authority to publish in order to reduce typo squats, looking for signals of impersonation. I thought those were some important actions that they're taking.
Yeah, I think there's two observations I want to say directly to that. The first is that any ecosystem, any registry, and I saw this at GitLab, and I've seen this, from the outside with GitHub and all and NPM, is that they want to do the right thing, but they also want to increase the use and in downloads, right? So that's, and he said it himself in that interview. So there's always going to be this tension between, lack of resistance. I remember the conversations, some of the orgs that I've been in, where you have this conversation between this tension between marketing, let's open up, and then security going, well, if we do that, this is going to be the problem. And those conversations have actual cost, and both in the sense of the security team, but what you have to pay for to make that work, and then counter that with this idea that Glassworm is the only thing. When I focus on Glassworm, I'm thinking to myself, I think he's looking a little too small, because VSIX files are just JavaScript files, right? Like you can literally take, well, not literally, but you can take almost exactly the same payload that you use in NPM, modify it ever so slightly, and deploy it in their ecosystem. And 98.5% of the world's malicious packages are hosted in NPM. And if NPM is that similar to OpenVSX, I think he's got a bigger problem than just Glassworm. But happy to be a part of that solution.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, this I think is on record as our longest episode, but it was worth the time. Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
No, I just want to say personally, big shout out to both Mikael and the the Eclipse Foundation, for reaching out and interacting with. I love that. Oh my gosh, if I wish I could have that with NPM and GitHub, getting them to interact or even look at my tickets when I'm trying to submit thousands of malicious packages is like pulling teeth. And here's an organization that reached out to us proactively. I just think that's amazing. And big shout out to the Eclipse Foundation for doing that. I really appreciate it personally.
Yeah, +1 to everything you just said. This is a community, and maintaining these kind of platforms is a really big responsibility. So, it goes a long way to get to know these people and to understand what they're working on. And yeah, they're not going to get it perfect every time, but they're never going to get it right if they're operating in a silo and not telling people what they're doing and not engaging. So huge kudos
100%.
to the team for being part of this. They're definitely out there hitting the podcast circuit. I saw that they were on Open Source Security, Josh's podcast recently. So yeah, I think we'll be seeing a lot more from Eclipse Foundation in the future.
It's part of Mikael's KPIs for the year, right? It's like how many podcasts he goes.
How many podcasts can you do? Yeah. All right, everyone, have a good one, and we will see you next week.
Thanks for listening. We appreciate it, guys. Cheers. Bye.